Can you think of a time where in a moment something changed? For example, a time where what was true for a long length of time changed and everything was different from that point on. Maybe you had a gaming system and it worked so well, but then you dropped it once and it no longer worked. Maybe you had a favorite toy, but it got lost and you never found it. Maybe you had a phone or an iPad and it stopped working because of exposure to water. Maybe to the opposite, something really cool happened in one moment and you were never the same. Well, here's the deal. Life happens in moments. One moment, everything can be going great. The next, it can feel like a grenade has gone off in your life. Some moments are absolutely incredible and seem to change the course and direction of your life. You know what moments I'm talking about, right? Like the big shot, the gift that you always wanted, even the moment that you wish hadn't happened. Well, life happens in moments. Did you know that you live 8,760 hours every year, and yet there are probably just 3 to 5 key moments every year that have a major influence on who you are and who you're becoming. The mundane, everyday matters. Your habits matter. The little choices you make matter. But when push comes to shove, for better or for worse, we're often shaped and molded by singular moments in life. That's why the one thing your dad said to you 5 years ago has influenced you in the way that you navigate your home life. It's why you haven't been the same since that super embarrassing moment happened to you on stage last year. And it's why in 10 years from now, you'll still have confidence in yourself because of what that coach said to you last week. Life happens in moments. And it's oftentimes at these moments, they end up shaping us. So maybe we should pay more attention to the moments we have or could be having with God. In this series, what we want to do is we want to explore some of these moments that people have with Jesus in the hopes that we'll be more present in them and more transformed by them. So here's the deal. If your Christianity has felt unengaging or uninspiring for longer than you're comfortable with, if you can point to a lot of people and experiences that have had a far greater influence on your development than your relationship with Jesus, even if you're ready to recognize God moments when they happen and get more out of them when they do, then guess what? This series is for you. Today, I want us to go to the book of John. John is located in what's known as the New Testament. Now, what you need to know is that the New Testament is composed of the books of Matthew through Revelation. The specific genre of the book of John is one that we call the Gospels. Now, I love John's perspective because John is a witness to the ministry of Jesus. And so this means that he actually saw the things that Jesus did. He actually had moments with it, physical, walking around, doing stuff Jesus. In fact, Jesus and John had significant enough moments with one another that John's nickname was the disciple whom Jesus loved. I guess that's not really a nickname, it's more like a subtitle, like John, the disciple whom Jesus loved. Anyway, if anyone understood the power of quality moments with Jesus, it was John. So we'd be smart to pay attention to what he has to say. And where we're jumping in, Jesus has begun his public ministry. And here's what happens in John chapter 5, starting in verse 1. Afterward, Jesus returned to Jerusalem for one of the Jewish holy days. Inside the city, near the sheep gate, was a pool of Bethesda with 5 covered porches. Crowds of sick people, blind, lame, or paralyzed, lay on the porches. One of the men lying there had been sick for 38 years. That's a ridiculously long time, by the way. When Jesus saw him and knew he had been ill for a long time, he asked him, "Would you like to get well?" What a silly question, right? That's like asking a blind person, "Would you like to see?" Of course they would say yes, unless they're Daredevil because his blindness makes him a superhero. But I'm fairly certain the man in this biblical story wasn't a masked vigilante by night. So we're going to stick with this seemingly feeling like a really dumb question on Jesus' part. But maybe it wasn't such a dumb question. Being an invalid in that day and age for 38 years would have meant that this guy had a routine and a community built in around him. He had a spot in the town square, and his income came passively by people just giving him money as they walked by. From the outside looking in, it's easy for us to assume this man would have wanted out of that existence. But haven't you ever found yourself wanting to stay stuck in a bad situation just because it's familiar? Haven't you ever found yourself choosing to stay in a toxic relationship just because you're afraid of being alone? Have you ever found yourself choosing to stick with a bad habit or addiction because even though it's destructive, you feel like you need it? Have you ever found yourself choosing to play the role of quiet, shy kid because you're afraid of trusting other people with who you really are? So I don't know. Maybe this question Jesus asked isn't so silly after all. Maybe it's a confirmation of sorts. Maybe it's a confirmation question. He wants to make sure that this man is sure that he wants his life to change. Verse 7 says this, "I can't, sir," the sick man said, "for I have no one to put me in the pool when the water bubbles up. Someone always gets in front of me." There was a belief that from time to time, an angel would stir the waters and whoever was first to get in would be healed. Now, whether this was actually the case or not, we don't know. But what we can see here is that this man clearly had made attempts to get well on his own, and his attempts had failed. He was so close to experiencing a moment and yet always so far. Here's what happened next. Verse 8, Jesus told him, "Stand up, pick up your mat and walk." Instantly, the man was healed. He rolled up his sleeping mat and began walking. Now, I probably don't have to tell you this, but that was a moment that changed everything in this man's life. And it happened when he encountered Jesus. This one moment with Jesus changed this man's future. He could be a totally different person. All of his hopes and dreams of what he wanted to do if he ever was healed were able to come true. This man forever knew that he could trust Jesus, and Jesus had done for this man what nobody else could have done. If he ever was to see Jesus again in the future, he would have a bond with him that maybe other people didn't. It was special. When God speaks, things happen. With only his words, Jesus brought healing to this man's whole body. And with just his words, Jesus did something incredible. This should sound familiar. In the beginning of the Bible, God creates creation by his words alone. Jesus, the Son of God, brings healing through his words. So what about you? Do you have a future that you need to invite God into? Do you have trust issues that you need to invite Jesus into? Do you need to trust the words of Jesus? Well, here's the reality. Just one moment, one word with Jesus can change everything. That one thing your dad said to you 5 years ago when he was angry, you've been holding on to that moment, letting it define you. But hearing what Jesus has to say about that moment could change everything. That one embarrassing thing that happened on stage last year, you've been holding on to that moment. You've been letting it define you, but hearing what Jesus has to say about that moment, it could change everything. Man, that horrible thing your so-called friend did to you a few weeks ago, you've been holding on to that moment. You've been letting that define you, but hearing what Jesus has to say about that moment could change everything. We all have moments in our lives that have defined us. Jesus loves being invited into those spaces. He loves asking us weird but insightful questions like, would you like to get well? And then changing who we are with the truth of his words. So here's my point. One moment with Jesus can change everything. My goal is to encourage you. The difference maker in any situation, friend, is Jesus. It's not a 3 or 12-step plan. It's not even wise words from a friend or a loved one. These are great, but they're not necessarily the answer. It's Jesus. In him, you can experience a life-changing moment. So talk with him. Invite him into the moments of your life that have defined you and see if he doesn't confirm why you can trust him with your past, your present, and your future.